Everyone goes through that rebellious phase in their teenage years. You fight with your parents, slam your bedroom door, make a few questionable decisions, and start thinking you own the universe. It's a classic cliche we've seen over and over again in pop culture. But what if, instead of just skipping class and causing headaches, the girl in question decided to literally stand up to the devil and put every soul on Earth at risk over a romantic whim? That's exactly the premise of Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. If you grew up watching that nostalgic 90s version with a talking black cat and harmless spells, you can erase that from your mind. The show we're analyzing today trades the laugh track for macabre rituals, cosmic horrors, and plenty of blood. So get ready for Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, a true masterclass in how stubbornness can literally swallow the universe whole. We meet our half-witch, half-mortal, and completely indecisive protagonist, Sabrina, who is about to turn 16 and face her inevitable dark baptism. On this special night, she's expected to sign her little name in the Book of the Beast and pack her bags for a new school focused exclusively on magic, which means saying goodbye to her useless boyfriend Harvey and her mortal friends. But like any rebellious teenager, she starts questioning if she really wants to hand her soul over on a silver platter to some horned lord. In a burst of high school activism to leave a legacy, she focuses on starting a Witches Supporting Women club. With the help of Miss Wardwell, who Sabrina has no idea has already kicked the bucket and is now just a shell possessed by Madam Satan, and her cousin Ambrose, she decides to apply some light pedagogical torture to the school principal until he signs the club's paperwork. Because when it rains, it pours. Sabrina gets a gift in the form of a curse from the Weird Sisters, three gothic mean girls who despise her mortal half-breed blood. Coincidentally, this is when she tries to summon a familiar and ends up with the iconic black cat Salem, the true owner of the show's charisma. Trying to clear her conscience, our protagonist decides to reveal to Harvey that she's a witch about to leave town. But dealing with the boy's feelings is too much work, so she magically fries the poor kid's memory instead. Meanwhile, in town, a random kid was stabbed, and Ambrose finds a sinister mark on the corpse, pointing to the existence of a witch hunter. However, Aunt Zelda and Aunt Hilda prefer to wear the blindfold of denial and focus solely on the baptism, ignoring the threat roaming the streets. Unsure of what to do with her life, Ambrose sends Sabrina to visit the oldest tree in the woods in search of divine wisdom. The result? She's thrown straight into a terrifying red hallucination where she has to run for her life from a possessed scarecrow sent by Madam Satan for kicks, barely escaping thanks to her feline Salem. After surviving that bad trip, she goes home to announce her final decision, only to find none other than Father Blackwood sitting cross-legged on her sofa, ready to use all his satanic silver tongue to convince the girl to embrace the darkness. Father Blackwood remains in Sabrina's living room, pulling the underworld's greatest marketing stunt, swearing up and down that the dark baptism is just a boring, harmless formality. He answers a flood of questions about the mortal world, trying to convince the girl that the Dark Lord isn't a bad guy, going as far as promising that if she signs the thick, dark book and doesn't enjoy the magical life, she can just go back to her normal life whenever she wants. It's a lie so blatant it would make a politician proud. Meanwhile, at school, a bunch of football players with the IQ of a doorknob continue to harass Susie. Deciding on some heavy-duty revenge, Sabrina recruits the Weird Sisters, and together, they lure the jocks into an abandoned mine. The witches cast a brutally humiliating spell that makes the idiots think they're with the girls, when in reality, they're just swapping spit with each other in one massive group kiss. Sabrina takes a wonderful photo of this intimate gathering, and threatens to leak it to the whole school, while the Weird Sisters keep messing with the boys' pea-sized brains without limits.
Dark.
Later, the aunts head out to arrange the final details of the demonic party, and Ambrose drops a bombshell. If Sabrina goes through with the ritual, her skin will stay tight and youthful, while her mortal friends rot and die of old age, proving she'll eventually end up alone with no one, just like you. Desperate at the revelation, she rushes to Rosalind's Halloween party for one last night of glory, dancing close with Harvey and begging him never to forget her before slipping away to meet her fate during the eclipse. She enters the dark woods and reaches the baptism site, where the entire coven and her aunts are standing by like vultures waiting for a feast. Blackwood commands the ceremony, but exactly when it's time to put pen to the Book of the Beast, Sabrina freezes. A ghostly vision of her late parents appears out of nowhere, telling her to run, and the girl obeys instantly, leaving everyone at the satanic altar looking like idiots. She bolts back to the family mortuary with the entire coven breathing aggressively down her neck. Seeing his cousin about to become witch kebab, Ambrose pulls a card from his sleeve and bluffs shamelessly, claiming the house has a brutal protection spell against magical intruders. The coven buys the lie and retreats, but Zelda stays behind, fuming with pure rage over the public humiliation. Far away, Mary Wardwell crawls desperately at the Dark Lord's feet, begging for mercy after failing miserably to deliver the girl. The next day, Principal Hawthorne calls Sabrina into his office, but she soon realizes the man is acting bizarre because the Dark Lord himself has taken possession of that flabby body. He praises the girl's stubborn rebellion, but makes it clear she will sign his big book one way or another, warning in a terrifying tone that all mortal flesh must eventually burn.
All mortal flesh must burn.
Sabrina is puking her guts out in the school bathroom after chickening out of her own baptism when Miss Wardwell tries to play the understanding mentor card, sending the girl running in terror. At the mortuary, Ambrose finds a random iguana in a coffin and wonders how to make the thing talk, but Zelda warns him the useless creature will kick the bucket soon because it can't survive without its master. Meanwhile, the protagonist's pathetic friends are complaining about life. Roz is furious because Principal Hawthorne banned her book for having passages too juicy for impressionable minds. Fed up, they march to the library to dig into other forbidden books. The bill for the canceled baptism finally arrives in the form of an infernal summons. The whole family loses their powers, and the ants start wrinkling like raisins left in the sun, because in witch justice, you're guilty until proven you're not a total failure. Ambrose hands over a business card for the underworld's Saul Goodman, lawyer Daniel Webster, but Zelda prefers to crawl to Father Blackwood, who demands Sabrina beg for forgiveness on her knees. Sabrina goes knocking on Webster's door but gets shooed away like a stray dog. Across town, Harvey tries to show his drawings to get a job at the arcade, but his dad overhears and tells the kid to go dig holes in the mine like a grunt. The trial begins with Father Blackwood holding the gavel, until Webster bursts through the door in a fit of conscience, declaring the girl innocent because her father once saved his skin. But the father pulls out the Book of the Beast and shoves it in everyone's face. The girl's signature was already there since she was in diapers. Zelda confesses that Sabrina's father sold his own daughter's soul in exchange for the devil's blessing to marry a mortal, leaving Sabrina absolutely livid. Webster gets a visit from Wardwell, cosplaying as his dead daughter, and Sabrina discovers the lawyer sold his soul to be the best, but the devil only gave him the most loathsome clients to defend, which resulted in his daughter's death. Despite the humiliation, he demands a trial by a mortal jury. Meanwhile, Ambrose flirts with Luke at the iguana owner's funeral, and they end up exchanging fluids in the bedroom after confirming they're both witches. In court, Blackwood threatens to throw Sabrina in the river to see if she floats. The father goes to their house and offers a deal signed by the Dark Lord himself. She can play with mortals if she attends the Academy of Unseen Arts. Ignoring the danger, Sabrina asks Harvey to check her body for a witch's mark, and the boy takes his shirt off because any excuse is a good excuse to show some skin. In the final showdown, Sabrina agrees to strip for the court, but Hilda tosses a baby album on the table, and Webster shoves a Catholic baptism certificate in the father's face. The basement doors blast open for the Dark Lord himself to call the manager. The verdict? Sabrina keeps her peasant life but must attend the academy and the Black Mass. Their powers return, the aunts get an instant magical Botox boost, and Wardwell kicks off her evil plan by starting a forbidden book club to corrupt the protagonist's defenseless friends. At the comic book store, Sabrina's needy friends try to force a girls' night because Susie's dad is going out of town, but our protagonist lies through her teeth, saying she has other plans. In reality, she's packing for the Academy of Unseen Arts, focused purely on learning how to kick the Dark Lord's ass. Hilda tries to stuff Salem the cat into the luggage, but Zelda says bringing pets to college is for losers and leaves the girl there. A creepy brat named Quentin leads Sabrina to Father Blackwood, who hands her a curriculum more useless than her mortal boyfriend. During recess, a handsome handsome warlock named Nick Scratch arrives, praising her father's brilliance, just in time for the weird sisters to show up and spit some venom. While Roz and Susie play nurse to Uncle Jesse, who lost his mind after seeing something massive and dark in the mines, Sabrina wakes up locked in a medieval cell. It's a college hazing ritual. She survives the night smiling because her furry feline snuck into the hole to comfort her. However, the joy is short-lived when she gets out of the shower and realizes the cat is gone. She goes after the weird sisters, but Father Blackwood interrupts the cat fight holding the animal's cage, telling Zelda to come collect the creature. Sabrina complains that the classes suck, so the father pulls out a cursed puzzle box that belonged to her father, the Acheron configuration. If she solves the toy, she gets a free pass to the dangerous classes. Outside, Nick confesses he's already been with all the weird sisters and agrees to help Sabrina break into the forbidden library. At home, Ambrose convinces Hilda to perform an astral projection so he can go on a date. In the middle of the trance, Miss Wardwell shows up pretending to want a coffin, just to plant curses on all the mirrors, until Zelda kicks the door down and ends her reckless nephew's astral party. The infernal hazing continues, and Sabrina is dumped in the middle of the woods, with the promise that she'll die if she looks back. The next day, Quentin reveals he kicked the bucket a long time ago, and shows her his own headstone. Sabrina calls in the aunts, who interrogate the ghost children and discover the only thing the brats want is permission to beat the hell out of whoever killed them. While Uncle Jesse tries to rip Harvey's head off at Susie's house, the weird sisters prepare a fancy gallows for Sabrina at the tree. But in a wonderful plot twist, the ghost kids pull the rope on the seniors' necks. Sabrina gets a promise that the hazing is over before releasing the choking witches. The protagonist returns home with a diary stolen by Nick, and Father Blackwood humiliates Prudence for losing to an uneducated rookie. Sabrina calls her annoying boyfriend and finally solves her father's puzzle box. The thing spits red dust all over the room and ends up releasing Batabat, a sleep demon with more pent-up rage than a worker on a Monday morning. Apparently, this creature used to torture Sabrina's father with insomnia 70 years ago until he locked the poor thing in a box. Now she wants revenge, and Aunt Zelda does the excellent job of sealing the whole house to protect everyone, forgetting the tiny detail of sealing the demon inside with them. Result: everyone is trapped with the spook as she starts handing out VIP nightmares to the whole family. Outside, Miss Wardwell, also known as the Mother of Demons, is freaking out because she can't get into the house and doesn't want the demon touching her favorite student. While the humans sleep, Salem the cat wanders the house acting as ghost bait. Unknowingly, the feline buys time for Wardwell to hack into everyone's dreams. The nightmares expose everyone's greatest fears, just like your browser history. Ambrose cries because he thinks he'll die lonely. Hilda thinks she'll be stuck to Zelda forever, and Zelda dreams she finally sends Hilda to the grave. As for Sabrina, she has the most dramatic nightmare of all. She tells the truth to her useless boyfriend, and he decides to lock her in an Iron Maiden. The torture only ends when Wardwell warns the protagonist she's in a dream, and uses a voodoo doll to stab her with so much pain that the girl wakes up with a jolt. Sabrina gets up drooling and runs to wake her aunts and the cousin she almost never calls cousin. Talking to her cat, who unfortunately has no voice actor to reply, our little witch decides that running is the best option. Using Ambrose's books, she comes up with a genius plan to use illusion magic to make the cat look like her, tricking the demon while she invades the family's minds to see everyone's hidden shames. When she enters the dream, Zelda is having a nervous breakdown of guilt, so it's up to Aunt Hilda to be the useful one. She realizes she's dreaming and notes that magical familiars can help trap the demon. With Ambrose inventing a genius-level distraction, Sabrina manages to cage Batabat in the real world, securing another win for her inflated resume. Now that she knows the family's dark secrets, she chooses to ignore everyone's psychological trauma to focus on the real problem. She goes to Miss Wardwell to demand explanations. After all, a civics teacher invading dreams with voodoo is a little suspicious, even by Greendale's bizarre standards. Touching a crazy uncle brings terrible consequences, and the main one is the demon Apophis deciding to hold a casting call with Sabrina's friends to see which one is the weakest, most pathetic host to possess once the old man kicks the bucket. The creature starts torturing the three teenagers and uncovers each of their traumas. Roz is terrified of going blind due to a lack of faith. based on her father's super scientific medical diagnoses. Harvey is tested and the demon simply concludes he's a huge, useless coward, which isn't news to anyone. But when it gets to Susie, things get heavy. Since she has an androgynous vibe and hides her own questioning, Apophis decides to humiliate the poor girl, calling her a freak and hinting that Uncle Jesse also played for the other team back in the day. Because of this, Susie decides to lock her secrets away, refusing to share her emotional baggage with her own friends. While the teens suffer, Aunt Hilda gets a job at a bookstore and cafe, leaving Ambrose in a deep depression. The confined warlock watches everyone else live great adventures, while the highlight of his day is putting makeup on cold corpses. He spends all his time whining about Luke, who has been ignoring his calls. Lucky for our mortuary goth, Hilda is prepared and carries love potions in her purse like normal people carry gum, ready to drug Luke the moment he shows up at Dr. Cerberus's cafe.
Hi, darling. What can I get you?
I'd like a medium latte, please.
In the older witch circle, Zelda is one step away from being excommunicated by Father Blackwood, but manages to save her own skin purely because a woman is pregnant with twins, and Zelda's record as a midwife is impeccable. Tired of trying to please a cult of misogynistic old men, Zelda decides to throw caution to the wind and joins her rebellious niece to perform an exorcism on Uncle Jesse. Joining this spiritual party is Miss Wardwell, who invents a wonderful fanfic saying she was Sabrina's father's secretary and promised to look after her. With Hilda also joining the gang, the Spellman family becomes the satanic Ghostbusters and successfully kicks Apophis back to hell. The problem is that Wardwell has now practically become the family's honorary aunt. This proximity allows the Mother of Demons to overhear Sabrina confessing her bold plan to screw over the Dark Lord himself. This puts Zelda on high alert, as the only thing keeping her from being tossed onto the pyre is her reputation for never losing a baby, and she's not crazy enough to bite off more than she can chew by trying to use that leverage to get Ambrose out of house arrest. We discover that Harvey's family isn't just a bunch of depressing rednecks, but actually a lineage of witch hunters who stole the town's mines through murder. Sabrina starts breaking into a cold sweat, fearing her useless boyfriend might decide to poke her with something sharp that isn't exactly what she wanted in bed. Considering she's already had to fry the boy's memory once, her paranoia is completely justified. Things get even weirder when Roz's grandmother, Nana Ruth, reveals her family was cursed by witches to go blind, but in exchange, they gained a bizarre sixth sense. The old lady uses this clairvoyance to call Susie a gentleman, confirming the girl has a very confusing identity journey ahead. Meanwhile, in Zelda's clan, we find out that being a woman is a literal hell. They prepare for the Feast of Feasts. 14 families offer a young woman to be the queen. Sabrina enters the lottery despite not even being baptized, and miraculously escapes the pot, being chosen only as a handmaid. The orphan Prudence hits the jackpot and can hardly wait for this moment, romanticizing the idea of feeding the coven. Trying to save the girl who loves licking the Dark Lord's boots, Sabrina asks Miss Wardwell for help. The teacher plants the idea that high priests love a private initiation before dinner, hinting they like to taste the queen's stuffing before everyone else. Sabrina serves a truth cake made by Hilda during the Last Supper, revealing that Constance rigged the lottery box because she hates Prudence. The gossip flows and we see Ambrose and Nick in the middle of a wild orgy. We then discover that Father Blackwood is Prudence's biological father, which makes him the biggest trash in the clan for rejecting her mother until she killed herself. Sabrina tries to blackmail the Father of the Year into canceling the feast, but another background witch offers herself up for slaughter, ruining our meddling protagonist's plan. At least Sabrina realizes Zelda would rather see the clan burn than let her niece become a Sunday roast. Ambrose and Zelda are more stuck in that house than you are in your dead-end job, but Father Blackwood decides to play fairy godmother and save them both. For Ambrose, the reward comes for keeping his mouth shut about his former criminal mentor, young Crowley. Thanks to a little push from a thirsty Luke, Blackwood decides to ease the warlock's house arrest with community service at the academy. As for Zelda, the favor is much more carnal. Since the father's wife is pregnant with twins and keeping her legs closed, Zelda decides to open hers. They start communing frantically behind the coven's back, mixing flagellation with fluids while praying they don't get caught red-handed. While the adults rub parts, Agatha and Dorcas decide to play sociopathic civil engineers and cause a collapse in the mine. Tommy dies buried, but Harvey miraculously survives thanks to a protection spell. What's left of the boy's relationship with his father is buried along with his brother, and Sabrina makes everything worse by casting a mental manipulation spell just so her boyfriend has the courage to speak at the funeral. With the help of Roz's magical vision, Sabrina discovers who the architects of the collapse were. Hilda then lets slip the family's dirtiest secret. Their cemetery is fertilized with soil from the Garden of Cain, soaked in the blood of Abel, which explains why she always sprouts back to life after being murdered by her sister. Armed with this dangerous information, Sabrina decides to play goddess of life and death. She plans to slit Agatha's throat, plant the girl in the magical soil so she revives like a weed, and in return, pull Tommy's soul back from the beyond. Ambrose warns that playing hide-and-seek with death is a terrible idea, but the blonde ignores all warnings with her usual arrogance. The tiny detail she forgot is that when a soul returns, it returns to its original body. Tommy's soul is stuffed back into his crushed corpse under tons of rock. Somehow, in some profane way, Tommy manages to crawl out of the dark mine. But whether he returned as the loving brother Harvey idolized or just a piece of rotting meat hungry for fresh brains, the residents of this miserable town are about to find out the hard way. Even so, dummy Harvey is jumping for joy over the walking slab of meat he calls a brother. Our arrogant little blonde thinks she's God himself, cheating death and Father Blackwood all at once. But the illusion ends quickly when Nick invades her room via astral projection just to rub in her face that Agatha is coughing up dirt and rotting alive, proving the protagonist's stupidity in not paying the magical toll caused a disaster. While Sabrina pulls overtime at the Bad Decisions factory, her useless friend Susie decides to steal a mundane book influenced by the ghost of her own aunt. She's caught red-handed and harassed by disgusting football players, but Aunt Hilda shows up to save the day. Out of nowhere, the script reveals that one of the players likes to play with other swords in the locker room, and the other has childhood trauma, ending the conflict in an absurdly anticlimactic way. The resurrection scandal reaches Blackwood's ears, and he's so fed up with Sabrina that he doesn't even care about Zelda's blackmail anymore. He orders the aunt to put an end to Zombie Tommy and sends Prudence and Dorcas to supervise the job, but Nick holds them back to score some points with the protagonist.
My apologies, ladies.
What have you done to us?
Faced with the chaos, Sabrina decides to throw a tantrum, spits in Zelda's face, and screams that she isn't her mother. Zelda is genuinely hurt, realizing the brat she raised has turned into an insufferable ingrate, and simply turns her back on the problem. Abandoned, our little witch runs crying to Miss Wardwell, who helps the girl take a stroll through the mortal limbo to find her brother-in-law's soul. There, she bumps into her own mother, who is moldering in the afterlife because she didn't get a holy water bath in life, and hears some strange gossip that she was stolen from the crib. But before she can process the family trauma, a massive soul eater sprouts from the shadows looking to swallow everyone. The creature gobbles up Tommy's entire soul, leaving only a limp arm behind to tell the tale. With no way out, Sabrina goes to Harvey and drops the bomb that she's a witch, and that she ruined his brother forever. The poor sap doesn't break up with her right then and there, but he asks for space. After all, his wonderful girlfriend just forced him to shoot his own zombie brother and dig a grave by himself in the backyard. Miss Wardwell was certain the mortals would cancel Sabrina after the graveyard disaster, but blind as a bat, Roz and Susie decide to stay by her side. After all, Susie's ghost ancestor helped bury the bodies of 13 witches in the past, making them unexpected allies. This leaves Wardwell so frustrated by the lack of drama that she takes matters into her own hands and resurrects the Greendale 13. The vengeful witches waste no time in summoning the Red Angel of Death to decimate the entire town. As it turns out, the old coven left those 13 poor souls to die on purpose. Father Blackwood couldn't care less about ghostly revenge and orders all the witches to lock themselves inside the academy, abandoning the mortals to become literal meat for the angel's scythe. When our protagonist complains about the lack of empathy, he basically tells her to kick rocks. Sabrina then teams up with her aunts and cousin to conjure a fake tornado, herding the entire population into the high school basement like a bunch of terrified rats. Nick is tasked with protecting Harvey, while Roz's useless grandmother decides this is the perfect moment to sit in her armchair and wait for death to swallow her whole. Over at the academy, Blackwood's wife goes into labor, pops out 2 kids, and dies in the process. Blackwood finally gets the son he always wanted and names him Judas.
To my firstborn son, hail Judas.
Hail Judas! Hail Satan! Hail Judas! Hail Satan!
but Zelda senses the danger and steals the actual firstborn, a girl. Meanwhile, Ambrose's boyfriend kidnaps him just to ensure his favorite toy doesn't get caught in the apocalypse. Sabrina and Hilda are left alone to defend the humans at the school. Dr. Cerberus pops up out of nowhere to kiss Hilda, sticking his tongue where it wasn't invited, while Wardwell whispers the final solution into the protagonist's ear. The only way out is to sign the Book of the Beast. With no other options, the blonde takes the pen, sells her soul to the Dark Lord, and summons some insanely overpowered hellfire, torching the Greendale 13 and proving herself to be one of the 4 most powerful witches in history.
And then they went up in hell flame, a gorgeous, searing inferno. Consumed.
Now that she's a full-blown servant of the devil and has fully embraced her dark side, she realizes playing house with Harvey is no longer an option. To stop more people from dying around her, she gives her ex a goodbye kiss and decides to join Prudence and the Weird Sisters. With Blackwood planning to drag the Coven back to the Dark Ages using his Golden Boy, he has no idea what kind of trouble he just signed up for. It's Letitia's first solstice, and our platinum blonde protagonist realizes she's more desperate for attention than a lonely soul on a Saturday night. Missing her useless mortal friends, Sabrina decides the best way to cure her loneliness is to drag her mother's soul out of limbo. She joins forces with Prudence and her henchwomen for an orphan girl seance, taking advantage of the fact that the veil between worlds is thinner than Aunt Zelda's patience. The problem is that Miss Wardwell, jealous of what a dead mother might spill, decides to douse the Spellman family's Yule log. This kills the house's protection and opens the doors for the Yule lads, a gang of rowdy spirits belonging to Gryla, an ancient witch who survived famine and now collects orphans to cope with her trauma. When the ghost brats invade the house, the family discovers the only way to get rid of Gryla is by bribing the old hag with gin and carbs. Everything was going smoothly until Letitia started crying. Gryla catches a whiff, realizes that baby definitely didn't come out of Zelda's womb, and tries to snatch the child for her bizarre daycare. Luckily, Diana's ghost manifests just in time to stop Letitia from being swallowed by the cannibal witch. Meanwhile, Sabrina continues acting as her ex-boyfriend's magical sugar mommy. She gifts him enchanted pencils and a spiked eggnog that magically cures Harvey's dad's alcoholism. Instead of getting on his knees to thank her for restoring the old man's liver, the boy has a total meltdown, flips out over the use of magic, and returns the gifts because apparently he prefers the drama.
I can't keep these.
Across town, Susie dresses up as an adorable elf only to be kidnapped by a demonic Santa called Mr. Bartell. Roz calls the cops, but the real solution is much more sadistic. They unleash Gryla on the fake Santa, since the old lady hates child predators, ensuring the monster is punished in true infernal fashion. Zelda realizes the house has become a dangerous madhouse and sends Letitia away to live with another family. Diana finally has a heart-to-heart with Sabrina, revealing what it was like to follow the path of night, which helps our little witch accept that losing the crybaby Harvey was a total blessing. But her mother drops one last bombshell. She's stuck in limbo holding hands with a saint and a demon, proving the Spellman family drama transcends even the afterlife. Tired of dealing with everyone else's mess, Theo finally embraces his true identity and decides to rub it in the patriarchy's face by trying out for the boys' basketball team. What the guys don't know is that Sabrina is hiding in the bleachers, injecting the ball with magical steroids, ensuring Theo sinks every basket like a pro. Harvey tries to process Theo's new reality, but he's too busy drooling over Roz, ready to start a romance and forget his platinum blonde ex for good. Our protagonist decides that mixing with mortals is too high risk, especially since the Dark Lord could call in a favor at any moment, and she doesn't want to accidentally blow her friends' heads off. So, Sabrina drinks the Academy Kool-Aid and embraces her infernal side, becoming increasingly rebellious and insufferable to Father Blackwood. The misogynistic old man wants to take the Coven back to the Dark Ages, but Sabrina decides to ruin his plans by running for Top Boy, going head-to-head with the coveted Nick Scratch. Blackwood nearly has a stroke and decides to sabotage our little witch with absurd humiliation rituals. During the Inquisition, he asks impossible questions that would make anyone cry, but Prudence and the sisters whisper the answers. Next is the Potion Challenge, where whoever causes the mixture to petrify has to swallow the thick, bubbling sludge. Sabrina loses this round but gulps down the stone juice without a flinch, surviving and winning a legion of fans just for her audacity to swallow every last drop. For the final conjuring test, Wardwell poisons Sabrina's mind, leading the girl to accuse Nick of cheating. To prove he's the ultimate simp and totally loyal to her, Nick joins the witch to conjure the dreaded Plague Kings as a duo. Seeing that Sabrina was about to rub her victory in his face, Blackwood acts like a spoiled brat who lost at a video game. He cancels the entire vote and crowns Ambrose as top boy, completely ignoring the fact that the guy isn't even a student. As the dust settles on this political circus, Zelda corners Blackwood to demand an official relationship status before the coven starts gossiping. Sabrina decides to enjoy life and goes on a date with Nick, while Miss Wardwell, tired of being the employee of the month without any recognition, summons Satan himself to demand answers and complain about her working conditions. Zelda decides she has zero patience for petty haters, and with Hilda's help, deals with the envious Shirley in the most diplomatic way possible, by stuffing a disgusting worm into a voodoo doll to turn the poor woman into her personal puppet. All this just so Zelda can work in peace with Father Blackwood on his pathetic little play without having to deal with the rival's mindless lackeys. Meanwhile, Madam Satan is fuming because a teenager who can barely wipe her own ass is being scouted as the prophet of hell to open the gates of darkness. Feeling more discarded than public restroom toilet paper, Lilith bets the Dark Lord that the protagonist is a useless brat unworthy of the title. The devil, tired of the demoness's midlife crises and her forgetting her place, accepts the wager instantly. The Dark Lord then decides to play some macabre pranks to test everyone's faith. He gives Hilda a minor scare, makes Ambrose suffer miserably, and tries to force Sabrina into committing heinous crimes, like stealing gum or ruining her ex's milkshake so he won't date someone else. But Sabrina refuses to be just another petty teenager. The only remotely useful thing the Horned One does is help Theo get revenge on the locker room bully who loved putting on a humiliating show. Since the brat won't give in to his petty whims, the devil plays for keeps, making the cat Salem sick and ruining the lives of all her friends until the girl finally cries uncle.
Stop. You've proven your heart.
As a reward for being a good, manipulable puppet, the Dark Lord promotes Sabrina from useless extra to the star of Blackwood's play. She is cast as none other than Lilith herself, playing the romantic lead and exchanging stage fluids with Nick's Lucifer. Seizing the moment, the devil cranks Sabrina's hormonal thermostat to the max, testing her limits. She almost gives Harvey VIP access, and spends her time sweating while imagining what Nick could do with his wand. But, proving she has ironclad self-control, she keeps her legs closed and settles for a very intense exchange of saliva with Nick on stage. The theatrical kiss is so hot, it makes the real Lilith cry in the audience like a rejected ex watching her former flame move on. To top it off and show who's the alpha, the devil rubs it in everyone's faces that he loves Sabrina and Nick's chemistry, leaving the protagonist completely paranoid about who she actually wants to play doctor with in the future. We find out that Dr. Cerberus is avoiding Hilda because he's possessed by an incubus, which means if he gets turned on, things become lethal and out of control. But Hilda is a resilient witch, and Zelda already has an extensive resume when it comes to riding sex demons, so dealing with a horny monster isn't exactly a challenge for this family. Meanwhile, Roz asks the protagonist for permission to pick up the scraps of her dead relationship. With Sabrina's seal of approval to pass on the used toy, Roz and Harvey go to the dance together. They make out and get heavy, but the vibe gets weird. Roz decides to come clean and confesses she's not just a regular mortal, which makes Harvey sigh in relief. At least he's not dating another satanic witch. He's totally down to take her to bed, but in the heat of the moment, the family curse strikes. Roz goes completely blind. This proves the universe hates this boy's love life and would rather rip a girl's eyes out than let him be happy. In the magical world, everyone is prepping for Lupercalia, which is basically Valentine's Day if it focused exclusively on lust, primal instincts, and a massive orgy at the end. Sabrina decides to join the debauchery because Nick has been laying the charm on thick and she's dying for a taste of that forbidden fruit. She even has a deep talk with Roz about losing her virginity and how to prepare the ground, showing the fire in the playground is about to start.
Warlocks! Are you ready?
But since the protagonist has a gift for attracting disaster, two things ruin her big night of love. First, Dorcas seemingly kidnaps Nick to suck his life force dry before the main event. Second, and much weirder, Nick's familiar, a she-wolf named Amalia, has a psychotic, possessive jealous streak and decides she doesn't want to share her master. To avoid becoming dog food, Sabrina is forced to murder the wolf right when they were finally about to mate. Nick collapses on the floor, sobbing over the bloody carcass of the creature that was like family to him. Obviously, being covered in dog blood with a guy crying on the floor kills any chance of a magical erection, but ironically, it connects them emotionally on a deep level, because nothing says true romance like a brutal canine homicide 30 seconds before foreplay. Aunt Hilda thought she was finally going to play doctor with Dr. Cerberus on a rainy day, but the universe hates her happiness and sends the whole town to ruin the mood at the bookstore. The main interruption comes in the form of Mistress McGarvey, who decides to read tarot cards to pass the time and rub everyone's greatest fears in their faces. Our blonde protagonist is spiraling because Nick lied about killing his pet wolf, so she suspects he's dipping his magic wand into the weird sisters. After the cards expose her emotional teenage insecurity, she corners the poor guy, demands exclusivity, and bans him from going anywhere near the unholy trinity. Meanwhile, Zelda is about to get hitched, but her head is with baby Letitia, who was sent to the woods with the witch Desmelda. Her fear in the cards? The old hag stealing her jerk of a fiancé. Just basic, dark, traditional family paranoia. The useless ex-boyfriend, Harvey, discovers his greatest fear is going to an art camp in Rhode Island, crossing paths with demonic entities and being trapped in the underworld forever. Roz flips out at the idea of the coven paying for her eye surgery, fearing her father is pulling a tithing scam, just like a local pastor, and that God, or the devil, will collect the price later. Then we have Theo, who wants to embrace his masculinity, but instead of asking Aunt Hilda for help, he decides to steal magical herbs from the Spellman house. The spell glitches, and he literally starts growing roots and turning into a tree. At least he got the hardwood he wanted.
I broke in and I stole one of your spells, and I tried to make a potion to help me transition, and now I'm,
Petrifying into wood.
That leaves Ambrose, caught in a stress sandwich between Father Blackwood and his family. The tarot throws him into a grotesque nightmare where he's hypnotized by his father-in-law and slaughters his own family. When the dust settles, Madame Satan sheds her McGarvey disguise, proving she just wanted to stir the pot in everyone's minds. But Ambrose's nightmare wasn't just a delusion. We find out that Luke is gone for good, and Blackwood really wants to put Ambrose on a leash to serve in his ridiculous Judas society. Our favorite demoness Lilith finally found a man worth a damn and decides to protect the human Adam from the Dark Lord's clutches, proving even hellish entities have weaknesses of the flesh. To throw her cuckolded boss off the scent, she disguises herself as Edward Spellman and manipulates Sabrina's mind. With her daddy issues in full swing, Sabrina makes Nick dive to the bottom of the Bermuda Triangle to rescue her dead dad's manifesto. Making your boyfriend swallow salt water for a soggy piece of paper is the peak of toxic romance. That document is the only thing that can stop Father Blackwood from plunging the coven into an impenetrable, misogynistic dictatorship for the next 100 years. Worse than Blackwood is anti-Pope Enoch. Ignoring all common sense, Sabrina uses Ambrose as a bridge, shoves the manifesto in Enoch's face, and leaves Blackwood foaming with rage. Meanwhile, Aunt Hilda proves that the spinster aunts are the most dangerous. She meets with the witch Shirley, who is still crying over being rejected by Sabrina's father years ago. Pretending to be a helpless pushover, Hilda laces her rival's drink with cyanide just to ensure the crazy lady doesn't show up to ruin Zelda's wedding. A poisoned toast to family peace. Blackwood doesn't take it lying down and decides to burn the evidence. He sends the Judas Society boys to assassinate the anti-pope and then slaughters the assassins themselves to clean the slate. He tries to get rid of Ambrose too, but the warlock escapes to Dorian's Grey Room, realizing Blackwood was the one who sent Luke to the great beyond.
For Luke, for all that is unholy.
Prudence almost slits Blackwood's throat while he sleeps, but backs out at the last second, finally gaining the long-awaited recognition as his legitimate daughter. Zelda's wedding arrives, and Sabrina, unable to keep her mouth shut, crashes the ceremony, hysterically screaming every possible accusation against the groom. The result of the blowout? Absolute zero. Ambrose is tossed into a cell, Sabrina and Nick are expelled from the academy, and Zelda marries the villain anyway. Blackwood combines the honeymoon with an overseas business trip, leaving Prudence in charge and proving that the protagonist's impulsiveness only serves to screw everyone else's lives over. Hilda and Sabrina are whining because Ambrose is being tortured in the dungeon, but the Council of Moth-Eaten Old Farts decrees he'll be executed the moment Blackwood sets foot back in town. Sabrina tries to beg Prudence for help, but since our protagonist has the empathy of a brick wall and only focuses on her own wonderful self, she gets a face-to-face cancellation from the Weird Sisters. Meanwhile, we discover Luke really did bite the dust, and the ones responsible responsible are literally angels. Yes, God's fan club has descended to Earth with exterminator badges to wipe out witches who don't live hidden in covens and like to mix with stinky humans. Jerry and Mehitable are the armed believers of the week. However, Roz uses her cunning to give a spoiler of the future and warns Sabrina to bail, showing these angels aren't exactly an unstoppable force of nature. Even Dr. Cerberus, who seemed like just a nerdy uncle, unleashes the incubus living in his body and sends one of the feathered freaks running without taking a single scratch. But Jerry and his squad decide to raid the academy like a divine SWAT team, mopping the floor with Prudence, Agatha, and Dorcas, and nearly sending Ambrose to the afterlife permanently. Sabrina rushes to the desecrated church where Hilda is trying to keep Ambrose's flesh intact while Nick acts like a bouncer at a gospel club. The angels corner our little blonde, shove a crown of thorns on her head, and fill the poor girl with arrows. She drops dead, proving the plot armor finally failed. Just kidding. Within seconds, the girl resurrects, floating in the air, bathed in a blinding light, and forces the angels to recite the Dark Lord's prayer on their knees before frying them out of existence with hellfire. To further humiliate basic biology, she brings two dead witches back to life to the crowd's delight. And in the middle of this profane pyrotechnic show, Harvey, the useless ex-boyfriend from a line of witch hunters, is left jaw-dropped and drooling as he watches Sabrina float with white eyes, looking like the gothic, super-powered version of Jesus. Sabrina's power level has now broken the server. It's shocking everyone because the girl doesn't need a spell, a pentagram, or to sacrifice a black chicken to do magic. She just thinks it, and it happens. Obviously, this makes Father Blackwood break out in a cold sweat. As the interim anti-pope, the last thing he wants is a superpowered teenager outshining his mediocre light. Following Prudence's poisonous advice, he decides to set a trap so our little blonde can be branded a heretic and executed alongside Ambrose in a guillotine BOGO deal. The moron even sends Sabrina to find the cousin's familiar to try and prove the boy's guilt. While Hell's bureaucracy runs wild and Sabrina and Nick miraculously win the right to return to school, the protagonist decides to play deity with the humans too. She simply restores Roz's sight with a snap of her fingers, curing the girl of a centuries-old curse as if she were curing a dust allergy. But the real horror show is at the Spellman house, where Zelda is suddenly wearing colorful clothes and twirling around the room like a Disney princess on illegal substances. It turns out warlock men have a dirty trick called the Caligari spell, to turn their wives into submissive dolls who only open their mouths to agree with any nonsense. Blackwood's plan starts to go south when Nick finds the corpse of Ambrose's familiar, but the hypnotized Zelda throws the creature into a meat grinder. Fortunately, grinding the evidence breaks her husband's spell, and old-school Zelda returns with blood in her eyes, ready to flush Blackwood's reputation down the toilet. Execution time for Ambrose arrives, and the circus truly catches fire. Hilda casts a sneaky spell on the executioner, making the idiot off his own head instead of the prisoners, spraying blood on the audience. After Blackwood unsuccessfully tries to force everyone to decapitate the warlock, the Dark Lord himself appears in the courtyard. Or rather, Sabrina uses her VIP powers to project a giant hologram of the devil, who publicly pardons Ambrose and brands Blackwood a fraud, ruining the old creep's career in front of the entire school. Even after losing his titles and seeing Ambrose walk free, Blackwood still thinks he's in control. However, deep in the mines, Harvey and Theo find a bizarre altar that displays Sabrina's face, floating with white eyes. This just proves that while Blackwood might try to fight, our little blonde is already a staple of the end times prophecy, ready to merge the human and magical worlds and swallow everyone in the process. With the possibility of being Hell's poster girl pounding in her head, our useless protagonist decides the best idea is to ask Madam Satan and Ambrose for advice. The genius plan involves making a mandrake suck up all her magical fluids, killing the plant, and letting the energy scatter through the universe. An idea so stupid even Nick thinks it's ridiculous. But the stubborn blonde digs her heels in and performs the spell, discovering it worked in the worst way possible when Lilith's little pet monster tries to put her in a coffin. The problem is that the mandrake isn't as dumb as Sabrina, so it secretly swaps places with a random root and takes over the protagonist's life. This knockoff copy goes around trying to steal her routine but soon hits snags. Roz uses her mystic X-ray vision to see through the disguise. Harvey gives the ghost girl the cold shoulder, and Theo refuses her offer to use magic for his transition, proving no one can stand Sabrina even when she's literally a vegetable. Meanwhile, Father Blackwood, though disgraced and acting like a rabid chihuahua, decides to found the Church of Judas and turn his back on the Church of Night. Zelda rushes to warn Hilda, who tries to whine to the witch's council, but the old farts ignore it all, at least until the spokesman, Methuselah, pulls Hilda into a dark corner, claiming the council is just theater before her thigh, trying to access her deep cavern. Unfortunately for the old lecher, Hilda's spider familiars turn him into a web cocoon before he can put his staff where it doesn't belong. Back in the patriarchal mess, Blackwood realizes Zelda is no longer under his mind control spell because Prudence decided to be a professional snitch. Zelda is thrown in prison, but not before rubbing it in Prudence's face that her dear daddy only cares about baby Letitia and would let his eldest daughter burn at the stake without blinking. The reality check makes Prudence free Zelda, though she decides to stay at the academy to play nanny to the orphans. On the other side of town, the ghost wakes Theo up just in time to see a Harvey Mandrake trying to play assassin. Theo slaughters the bald plant, kills the rest of the cursed garden, and wakes the originals. To add to the chaos, Blackwood sends his thugs to take out Sabrina, but they run into the Mandrake version, who snaps all their necks with a crunchy pop. Nick and Sabrina resolve to tie Lilith up in an impromptu bondage session, and while Nick reads the damn prophecy, the villain finally realizes the blonde was born to be the Queen of Hell. The revelation makes her suddenly care about the apocalypse. It turns out the final perversion needed to open the gates of hell is Sabrina's own suicide. Instead of taking poison, she stages a Western-style duel with her vegetable twin and murders the Mandrake, completing the Apocalypse bingo card after already checking off Exorcism, Resurrection, a trip to Limbo, and signing the Book of the Beast. We've reached the point where everyone gets a little busy work to try and stop the end of the world. In a hilarious turn of events, the mere mortals are tasked with holding back the gates of hell using nothing but shotguns and dynamite, proving their tactical planning has the collective IQ of a potato. Fortunately, Roz uses her cunning to see magical symbols, passes the visual gossip to Harvey to draw, and Theo finds the courage to stick the final mystic decal on the door, activating a locking spell that saves the day. While Father Blackwood tucks tail and runs like a freshly neutered dog, the rest of the group decides to stay and go toe-to-toe with the devil. Their first genius idea involves massaging Lucifer's colossal ego so Sabrina can immobilize the horny beast. Ambrose distracts him, and the aunties can stab his wings. However, Lucifer just laughs in their faces, revealing that only the Spear of Longinus can so much as tickle him, making the toys Lilith handed out completely useless. The second brilliant attempt involves Nick cracking the Acheron configuration, since the poor guy was revealed to be a pawn of the Dark Lord himself, and Lucifer dropped the bombshell that Sabrina is his daddy's little girl. Nick decides to seek redemption over teen romance. Since the protagonist is too dense to understand a Rubik's Cube, and the aunties and Ambrose lack the mental capacity to solve the puzzle, the weight falls entirely on the emo warlaw. As expected, the box plan fails miserably, but since Sabrina's father was an anatomy-obsessed nerd who based the box's complexity on the human body, they reach the most insane conclusion possible. Nick and Lilith force Lucifer's demonic smog down the warlock's throat, turning Nick into the Dark Lord's newest human Tupperware. To stop the devil from tearing the boy in half, Ambrose casts a potent sleeping spell, essentially drugging the apocalyptic threat. With the boss caged inside a teenager, Lilith grabs Nick's sleeping body and drags him down to hell so she can finally sit on the big black throne. As a consolation prize, she returns the real Miss Wardwell to the land of the living and restores the protagonist's powers, making it look like Greendale might finally get a minute of peace.
I restore to you all your witch.
With Blackwood having slaughtered most of the coven before his cowardly escape, Zelda decides it's the perfect time to found the Church of Lilith and crown herself the new High Priestess, because hierarchy is everything. Meanwhile, Ambrose and Prudence pack their bags to hunt down the fugitive ex-priest and recover the kidnapped babies. And just when you think Sabrina, Theo, Roz, and Harvey are finally going to focus on school and have a normal life like everyone else, the useless blonde decides to kick logic out the window. Instead of enjoying the calm, she turns to her friends and announces they're going to take a slip and slide straight to hell to rescue her boyfriend, proving that the worst curse in this universe is the protagonist's inability to stay in her own lane. Zelda and Hilda are trying to start their own church, but convincing a bunch of goth teenagers to worship a new god is harder than sticking to a diet on the weekend. To make the headache worse, the council of decrepit old men shows up lying through their teeth, swearing they had a friendly chat with the Dark Lord, who is still very much locked up. Zelda, with the patience of a live grenade, decides to throw in the towel. During evening prayers, she kneels and starts praying to Lilith, hoping the demoness will bring the raw power and respect she so desperately wants to rub in society's face. Meanwhile, Ambrose and Prudence are being played for fools by Father Blackwood. Tired of being the joke of the week and losing to her father's intellect, Prudence decides to resort to voodoo. She drags her cousin to Louisiana, and boom, they discover that the coward Blackwood is playing hide-and-seek in the middle of nowhere in Scotland. Meanwhile, Sabrina, unsure how to save her boyfriend, recalls Dorian Gray and his strange, magical paintings. He agrees to give them a ride to the underworld through his art, but he charges a ridiculous toll. She has to pluck a flower from the friendly Forest of Torment. Obviously, without thinking twice and keeping it all from her aunts, Sabrina drags her useless mortal friends straight into the devil's lap. The group is about as prepared to deal with demons as a penguin in the Sahara. On the way, they start hearing the voices of dead relatives whining, like Theo's crazy uncle, Harvey's useless brother, and Roz's blind grandmother. A real family horror show, but apparently only Uncle Jesse is actually down there burning and suffering. Deep in the pit, Lilith has the crown on her head but is being treated like a side chick. Hell is a complete mess, and the demons refuse to call her queen. I hate to admit it, but the demoness realizes she needs our blonde little witch, and Sabrina realizes she needs Lilith to get Nick out of that hot hole and deal with Lucifer. Big Daddy Lucifer pressures Sabrina to sit on the throne once and for all. She goes for it, but guess who pops up? Caliban, the Prince of Hell sculpted from clay, appearing just to challenge the girl. The brawl will have to wait though, because Sabrina is focused on the main prize, ripping Nick out of that horrible place. She names Lilith as her regent, thinking a fake title solves everything, and heads home swearing she can balance high school life with ruling the underworld. Spoiler, the storm is just beginning. Theo finds a new friend with benefits named Robin, a mysterious boy from a small town nobody cares about that probably isn't even on the map. Like someone who doesn't want to share their snack at recess, Theo hides the newbie from the rest of the useless squad, keeping the boy all to himself while the supernatural world burns outside. In Scotland, Prudence's voodoo trip finally bears rotten fruit. She finds Faustus Blackwood, but the guy is living in a totally bizarre time zone. He swears he's been gone for 15 years, and looking at the twins, Judas and Judith, who are no longer in diapers and have grown terrifyingly fast, the macabre math actually adds up. Faustus thinks he's the ultimate grandmaster with his souped-up magic and inflated ego, but all that arrogance is worthless when Prudence cracks him over the head with a rock, knocking him out like a bag of trash. No ancestral magic beats good old-fashioned physical violence. Back at the Spellman house, Sabrina has a giant cosmic pickle on her hands. She's stuffed Lucifer in the basement, and the former CEO of Hell is driving everyone crazy with his annoying presence. Zelda's nerves are so fried she ends up slapping Agatha across the face in the middle of the living room in front of all the students, totally influenced by the devil's toxic gossip. The old lady is one step away from a total breakdown and a straitjacket, but Prudence's rock to the head ends up killing two birds with one stone. When Ambrose and Prudence drag Faustus's unconscious and humiliated body inside, they find the perfect demonic vessel. Lucifer is ripped out of Nick and shoved down Blackwood's throat, freeing the handsome warlock to go back to hooking up with the blonde in peace. And what do they do with the creepy twins who aged overnight? Instead of intensive therapy or enrolling them in Zelda's school, they simply lock the kids in a magic dollhouse. Absolutely flawless parenting. Inside Faustus's mind, Lucifer isn't suffering nearly as much as Nick did. In fact, the two sociopathic villains start having a super friendly chat about the Eldritch Terrors, cosmic entities so old and terrifying they make the classic gods look like crying toddlers. Meanwhile, our protagonist discovers the joys of manual labor in the underworld. She now has a divine obligation to drag souls to hell to keep the flames hot, but the girl decides to play Mother Teresa and spares a mortal soul, which leaves Beelzebub spitting fire and sends the popularity of the Clayboy, Caliban, soaring among the gossiping demons. To try and save face and act tough, Sabrina takes the next soul in line, a piece of human garbage who sacrificed people to live longer, and tosses the bastard straight into the fires of torment. She demands he suffer as much as possible, in a move that is both cute and full of pure hatred. But of course, it does absolutely nothing to shut up the kings of hell, who still hate the teenager's co-leadership and are conspiring behind her back. Surviving a demonic possession leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. and Miss Wardwell is struggling not to go full Joker thanks to her brutal PTSD, since her entire notion of a normal life has gone down the drain. Meanwhile, the mortal world tries to pretend love exists, with Theo getting passionate kisses from Robin in a moment so sweet it would make you vomit rainbows, if it weren't for one small bloody detail. Robin is actually part of a traveling carnival looking for innocent blood to drink, proving that having a trash radar for relationships transcends all dimensions. At the witch's house, Zelda continues treating Hilda like her personal maid and daily emotional punching bag, but Dr. Cerberus decides it's time to rescue his beloved from this radioactive toxicity and drops a marriage proposal on the table, leaving Zelda in a total panic as she realizes her favorite slave is about to pack her bags and live her own life. Downstairs, hell has literally turned into a student council meeting. Caliban shows up with a petition of 666 signatures, acting like an annoying class president, challenging Sabrina's crown just because the girl wants to improve working conditions and soul acquisition in the underworld. This results in a ridiculous demonic scavenger hunt to see who can find King Herod's lost crown first. Ambrose proves he's the only guy in hell with access to Google and finds the crown in 2 seconds, but loses the artifact immediately because he was too busy being a helpless nerd in the library. When Sabrina goes to trade blows with the crown's guardian, Caliban takes advantage of the distraction, steals the item, and flees to hell to claim a pathetic victory. Sabrina is so furious at the Clayboy's audacity that she simply slaps the life out of him, hitting him repeatedly in a display of pure physical violence that has Beelzebub and the rest of the demons cheering like they're watching a UFC fight at a bar. But if the brawling is heavy in hell, the cheating heart drama is louder on earth. Harvey is whining with insecurity like a baby because Roz's friends are buff, and Nick decides it's a great idea to have a fragile masculinity crisis because Sabrina looked at Caliban. Ignoring the fact that the girl invaded the depths of hell, broke the rules of the entire universe, and spent all day hugging his useless carcass, Nick proves that male emotional immaturity transcends the astral plane. He runs off to Dorian Gray's bar, begging for some sweaty and questionable nightly entertainment to soothe his pathetic frustrations. Since Lucifer's powers come from his original angelic essence, Ambrose crafts a genially disturbing plan to kidnap an angel, drain his celestial veins, and make a thick, holy juice to solve the family's problems. The only flaw in this perfect plan is Dorian, who can't hold back his aesthetic impulses and decides to steal the divine liquid, swallowing all the angelic goo at once to fix his ruined skincare routine, proving that vanity is truly the ruin of heavy magic. To make a bad situation worse, Sabrina decides to take a stroll and finds out the hard way that Nick has turned his existential crisis into an amateur BDSM festival with sex demons. When she has the audacity to question her boyfriend about getting whipped by strangers in the underworld, Nick totally snaps and blames her, spitting out the words that Sabrina wasn't worth it after all the torture he endured. As the romance turns to cosmic dust, Zelda finds out that Sabrina is the queen of all hell and has a massive nervous breakdown over being the last to know. Combining this with the fact that Hilda is about to get married and fly the coop, Zelda puts on her ultimate victim cape and accuses everyone of being selfish, completely ignoring her own galactic narcissism that destroys everyone's lives. On the surface, a band of pagan witches calling themselves Carcosa decides it's time for revenge for past persecutions, sprouting up in town like angry vegans thirsty for blood. They start the cleanup by sending Roz to the Stone Zone, turning the girl into a statue for being a nosy seer. They capture 2 of the weird sisters and send a clear ultimatum to Zelda: either the coven kneels to the gods of the forest, or everyone becomes organic fertilizer. Desperate and realizing that Lilith has the defensive utility of a broken umbrella, Zelda decides the only way out is to unpack Lucifer, hoping the Dark Lord crushes the pagans before punishing his own coven. But when she goes to check on the prisoner, despair hits stratospheric levels. Lucifer masterfully tricked the BDSM boy, leaving Nick chained up like a stray dog while he ran off hand in hand with Faustus to a villain camp. With the devil on the loose and the pagans knocking violently at the door, Zelda is left shivering, silently praying that Sabrina pulls an absurd solution out of the bottom of her cauldron before the forest swallows them all alive. While Robin desperately tries to hide his dirty pagan camp secrets, the urge to swap spit with Theo speaks much louder. Theo isn't quite in love with the elf boy yet, but the teenage hormones are simmering and they start exploring feelings that had been tucked away in a box of frustrations. On the other side of hell, Sabrina rolls up her sleeves, lips, and finally sucks every last drop of Lucifer's sticky, dark residue out of Nick's body. But even after being cleaned and emptied, the emo warlock doubles down and confirms he wants absolutely nothing to do with our protagonist. He uses the classic coward's excuse of needing a break, proving he's just as useless at dealing with his own feelings as you are. While the teenager deals with her broken heart, Faustus and Lucifer decide to play gods of destruction and test their influence on the town. They send Harvey and a bunch of jocks, whose brains have melted from testosterone, straight into a bloody slaughterhouse. The carnage is absolute, and Harvey is the only one who survives to cry about it, purely because the script still needs him to suffer a little more.
Why? You're not even men. You're boys.
We're not leaving here until you tell me what you and your friends did to my girlfriend.
Soon after, the pagans decide to recruit the most impressionable and dumbest witches around, resulting in the death of one of them and making it crystal clear that the Dark Lord couldn't care less about saving the coven. With no divine or infernal help on the way, and all attempts to gain power being pathetically interrupted, the coven panics and begs for help. The desperate call attracts Gryla and Mambo Michelle to Greendale, two magic legends who arrive looking like they'd rather be cleaning sewers than helping this dysfunctional family. In the middle of this total chaos, Caliban is pushed center stage as the next candidate for the Queen of Hell's boyfriend. Sabrina and the Clay Prince are thrown into a ridiculous mission, and she surprisingly manages to make his heart of earth flutter with a sense of honor. However, the blonde decides to ditch the guy immediately after, ruining any chemistry that had just been built and destroying the chances of an easy alliance. With the Dark Lord loose and the protagonist making one stupid decision after another, Lilith begins to seriously question if Sabrina is actually worried about her regent's survival, or if she's just a giant spoiled disappointment walking through hell. Hilda finally confesses she's been cursed and is turning into a hairy, hungry spider woman, expecting her fiancé to run for the hills. Instead, Dr. Cerberus acts like the most understanding man in the world, accepting his fate of being slowly devoured or becoming a midnight snack for his future monstrous wife. Meanwhile, Caliban decides the best way to stop the mortal world from becoming a giant infernal grill is to propose to Sabrina. But our protagonist prefers cheap fanfic romance and discards the perfect political alliance, tucking the idea in her back pocket just in case she changes her mind. With Roz serving as a giant stone doorstop and Nick drowning in his own misery, Sabrina feels more stretched and pressured than ever. Taking advantage of the blonde's fragility, Caliban drops a miraculous spell on the table capable of turning Roz back into soft flesh. The only problem is the process requires a kiss from Harvey, charging all the love he feels for the girl as a toll. Harvey accepts the sacrifice and mashes his face against the stone statue with all his might, but Roz remains rock hard, proving his kiss is so disappointing and weak that even magic won't accept it. Caliban takes advantage of the public humiliation to mock Harvey and Sabrina, forcing the witch to follow Prudence's toxic advice. Sabrina executes a DIY ritual, literally cutting the magical ties of love and affection she felt for Harvey and Nick, embracing the bitter single life to focus on real problems. Tired of seeing the refugee witches taking up space in the living room, Sabrina decides to turn them into a human battery. She absorbs the magic of all of them and invades the pagan camp with the subtlety of a runaway bulldozer. She kidnaps Circe and forces the witch to use her transmutation powers to return Roz and Dorcas to their original flesh and blood states. Hilda realizes she can no longer control her hunger for human meat and calls Zelda, begging to be murdered. Zelda doesn't waste time, sends her own sister to the great beyond, and tosses the corpse into the cane pit, hoping the magic soil resurrects Hilda without the spider instincts. But peace lasts exactly 0 seconds, as Faustus and Lucifer decide to pay a visit to Mary Wardwell, who was hiding Lilith disguised as Adam. The dynamic duo of evil casually reveals to the mortal that the Spellman family consists of satanic witches. Completely losing it, Mary marches to the mortuary and pumps Zelda full of lead the exact second she finishes burying her sister. While the witches fall dead, Lilith initiates a separation spell on Faustus's body, trying to stitch together a pathetic deal to save her own skin, while Lucifer takes a deep nap. Lilith, the queen of the underworld, decides the best life insurance policy is to have the devil's baby, making a dark deal with Faustus to get pregnant and use the as a biological human shield. She knows full well she'll probably kick the bucket before she sees the kid ask for their first allowance, but she swallows her pride to buy time. While she tries to save her skin through infernal motherhood, voodoo witch Michelle performs improvised surgery, digging the bullet out of Zelda and trying to protect the redhead's body as the apocalypse is violently banging on the Spellman's door. Zelda, however, has taken a spiritual vacation in a foggy limbo, where she runs into her late brother Edward and her sister Hilda, who is still rotting rotting in the cane pit without a single sign of life. Edward decides to take a stroll through Zelda's memories and hands over a full tutorial on how the congregation can recover their lost powers, proving that her insistence on remaining ignorant has finally taken a break. But the plan for glory crumbles faster than high school relationships thanks to the idiot Faustus Blackwood. He uses his manipulative influence to make Agatha permanently cancel Dorcas's life subscription. The original idea was for Agatha to also dispatch Prudence, but since she fails miserably at the outsourced job, Faustus decides to get his own hands dirty and eliminates his daughter. And at the exact second Zelda finally wakes up from her mystic nap, Faustus sends her to the coffin for good and packing Michelle into the massacre combo. Congratulations, Sabrina, you are now the only Spellman with a beating heart. The problem is, our platinum protagonist just became a living statue. Thanks to the brat Judas and his final challenge against the clay surfer Caliban, Sabrina is completely trapped in a crust of brimstone. With the blonde petrified at the bottom of hell, Caliban has a clear path to rub his six-pack on the throne, which means the Morningstar family reign has finally gone down the drain.
And it's encircled to create.
And if the underworld has turned into a quarry, Earth has transformed into a literal mortal pagan barbecue. The god Pan decides it's slaughter time, eliminating Robin. Roz and Theo are chained up like dungeon decorations, while the crybaby Harvey is dragged off to be the great virgin sacrifice, since apparently Theo and Robin have already been swapping fluids and lost their cosmic purity cards. The useless mortal starts screaming Sabrina's name, begging for a miracle, completely ignoring the fact that their only savior is buried in the deepest level of hell, serving as a paperweight. When the situation becomes completely untenable, our little witch's solution is simply to kick space-time right in the teeth. A future Sabrina appears out of thin air and shatters the original sulfur crust, pulling her out of that infernal rock before it's too late. In the bizarre timeline this traveler hails from, Caliban's crusade to rule Earth failed miserably because the pagans had already turned the planet into a giant human meat grinder. Almost everyone became fertilizer, but Cousin Ambrose managed to pull magic out of who knows where to create a protection spell and hide out in the Harvey family mines. Together, the two hatch a genius plan to use the mysterious egg that Faustus so desired to travel back in time. The protagonist wastes no time, summoning the demon Batabat to torture Faustus until he spills the beans, grabs the egg, and travels back to the exact moment Dorcas died, and Blackwood was on his way to commit his massacre at the Spellman house. Now, with her powers fully recharged after that long nap in the stone, Sabrina goes leaping from one side to the other, repositioning people across the board like she owns the place. Zelda finally wakes up, but this time she invokes the name of Hecate with all her might, founding the Order of Hecate to worship the 3-in-1. And because when it rains, it pours, Hilda sprouts from the cane pit like a vengeful zombie daisy. The retaliation against the pagans comes with a taste of absolute humiliation. Pesta simply deletes their god from existence, poor Harvey and Roz manage to finish off Nagaina, Prudence dispatches the god Pan straight to hell, and Hilda grabs a voodoo doll to squeeze the life out of Cersei like a tube of toothpaste. Ignoring all laws of the universe, the original Sabrina and the future Sabrina make a completely absurd pact of coexistence. The original descends to the underworld to take the throne for good, making Caliban get a taste of his own medicine as he's swallowed by sulfur, while Lilith and Lucifer crown the new queen. Meanwhile, the future version decides to head back to Earth to play normal teenager. But in less than 2 hours, the blonde from the future blabs to Ambrose about the monstrous paradox she just created, leaving her cousin with 2 massive problems on his back. As if dealing with broken time weren't enough, Prudence discovers that Dorcas's death is now an unfortunate permanent reality, and blames Ambrose for not letting her slice and dice Blackwood when she had the chance. The only decent couple in the series goes down the drain, and Prudence ends the night hooking up with none other than the crybaby, Nick. While Zelda flirts with Mambo Marie, inviting her to be a teacher at the academy and perhaps something more to keep her bed warm at night, the relentless Faustus, along with the creepy twins and a manipulated Agatha, cracks the shell of the cursed egg and awakens the eldritch terrors. Reverend Blackwood, who refuses to simply fade out of existence like a decent villain, has founded a pathetic new little church to feed his inflated ego. Someone named Abigail is out spreading the word as if she's his official wife, while Miss Wardwell, traumatized to her very core after being Lilith's personal plaything, joins the fan club as the newest brainwashed recruit, leaving us to wonder if she'll be just another useless pawn or a true queen of chaos. Meanwhile, our protagonist realizes that playing the mystic hero has left her completely isolated from the world. With the Fright Club on an eternal hiatus, Theo, Robin, Roz, and Harvey spend all day rubbing their faces together and swapping spit, leaving Sabrina as the official third wheel of Greendale, with only Ambrose left to endure her complaining. Even Aunts Hilda and Zelda are much more preoccupied with playing with their respective partners in the bedroom than giving the needy teenager a shred of attention. Desperate for affection and fleeing the torturous sight of Nick and Prudence making out again, Sabrina does what any toxic person would do. She manipulates Hilda into forcing the Fright Club to reunite. But after a supposedly fun adventure, Roz uses her cunning gifts to throw the truth in the protagonist's face, revealing she knows perfectly well that this whole staged charade was just a cheap trick to steal their attention. Sabrina then takes a painful reality check, realizing that while she spent the last few years drowning in absurd traumas and living a double life full of lies, her friends were coasting on normality, protected by her. But true friendship is only proven by an apocalyptic threat, and a new ultimate evil, essentially a hollow, depressing darkness, decides to show its face in town to liven things up. Wasting no time, Sabrina runs to the Greendale Mines, that absurdly convenient hole that mysteriously houses everything from a direct portal to hell to the actual source of the end of the world. There, she summons her own copy ruling the underworld, and together with the Order of Hecate, the two Sabrinas dispatch the first Eldritch Terror, as if they were taking out the trash. To try and fill the black hole of her own loneliness, the witch accepts questionable dates with a mortal and a warlock, bracing herself for the next monsters and the pilgrims of the night who are already lining up to get beaten. Our protagonist's desperate quest for affection continues to be a disaster of epic proportions. Her date with a muscular mortal named Carl and a useless warlock named Melvin proves that normal boys are simply unbearable. Carl has zero interest in horror and the intellectual depth of a puddle, while Melvin just wants to spend the whole night vomiting his emotional traumas into her lap. Neither comes close to the toxic adrenaline and lethal danger she savored when she got into trouble with Harvey or Nick. At the peak of the blonde's loneliness, Lilith emerges from the shadows with a wonderful, wicked plan to ruin Sabrina Morningstar's marriage to Caliban, completely ignoring the small detail that her selfish actions could collapse multiple realms simultaneously. Our original Sabrina accepts the plot with open arms. After all, Caliban tried to trap her in a rock before, and destroying her infernal copy's marital bliss seems like excellent therapy to cure her chronic loneliness. But the sabotage attempt fails embarrassingly. In an absolutely bizarre loyalty test, Caliban proves his unconditional love for the infernal version by giving up his own clay balls. Literally sacrificing his manhood for love, the Prince of Clay secures the marriage. Taking pity on her single version, Hell Sabrina suggests that the original simply manufacture her own boyfriend from scratch, mixing the best parts of Harvey and Nick as if she were opening a man-crafting workshop. While she contemplates becoming a boyfriend engineer, the Eldritch Terror of the Week decides to knock on the door. Known as the Uninvited, the freak disguises himself as a filthy beggar. If you deny him hospitality, he gently rips your heart out with his bare hands. A perfectly poetic punishment for heartless people, worthy of a bad sitcom laugh track. But no matter how lethal the cosmic threat of the day is, the protagonist always pulls a wild plan out of her hat. With the help of Lucifer himself and her crowned copy, Sabrina lures the disgusting wanderer and locks him inside the same cramped dollhouse that served as a prison for Reverend Blackwood's cursed children, putting a temporary end to the slaughter of mortal extras. Speaking of the Reverend, we discover that this certified lunatic was the only idiot to welcome the stinking monster. Crawling for crumbs of power as he always does, Blackwood begged the cosmic beggar for a divine connection to the terrors, securing his hallucinatory visions and preparing the chaotic ground for the next freak on the list to step onto the stage. For ages, Roz thought her family curse that left everyone blind was just a tragic quirk, but Mambo Marie and her dead grandmother pop up from the beyond to let her know she's literally a witch. Instead of freaking out and running away crying like a normal person, Roz decides that playing with magic is much better than putting up with useless mortals and immediately watches the coven murder a king of hell in cold blood. Prudence gets jealous of this sudden friendship, but eventually accepts the newcomer to form the new Weird Sisters, who will basically serve as a fire alarm for the upcoming Eldritch Terrors. Speaking of weirdness, the monster of the week is the Weird, a disgusting parasite with a tentacle fetish that wants to drag humanity back to the depths of the sea while charging a blood tribute. Unlike other threats that seemed like cartoon villains, this octopus creature almost makes the entire classroom, including Roz and Harvey, slit their own throats in a collective breakdown. Ambrose enters the scene thinking he solved the problem on the first try, but his incompetence costs Sabrina dearly, as she ends up losing her chance to to swap spit with Lucas. This newcomer was the protagonist's latest desperate attempt to create a perfect Frankenstein boyfriend using the leftovers of Nick and Harvey, but the date goes down the drain. To expel the tentacled terror from inside Sabrina, the first genius idea is to drain all the water from her body until she turns into a human raisin. The creature fakes its death but soon returns to cause more havoc. Then they realize the only way to kill the parasite is to make Sabrina's brain and environment too radioactive and toxic for any living being to inhabit, which, let's be honest, probably wasn't that hard. The slime slides out, is imprisoned in a random octopus, and frozen forever. The ultimate simp, Nick, watches everything from the sidelines because he's still intensely pining for his ex. After seeing that the giant emotional hole in her chest turned her into the perfect host for the monster, Sabrina finally gets her act together, destroys the custom boyfriend doll, and promises to stay single to focus on herself. Even with the universe collapsing every 5 minutes, Sabrina decides the top priority of her life is to become student council president alongside Roz. Zelda and Harvey hate the idea, complaining it's a waste of time, but their tantrums are completely overshadowed when a cosmic traveling salesman called the Trinket Man offers a wish-granting idol to Father Blackwood. Like the deadbeat villain he is, Blackwood doesn't pull a single cent out of his pocket and simply steals the magical artifact in broad daylight. With infinite power pulsing in his hands, he transforms all of Greendale into a private fascist empire, becoming a fifth-rate supreme dictator, and calling anyone who dares breathe near him a witch.
Robin Goodfellow, you are accused of being a witch. What?
He knows perfectly well that this magic word is the perfect trigger to lure Sabrina and her massive savior complex. But this time, the protagonist suffers, because this eldritch terror performs a mental reset on all her allies, erasing their powers and memories. With her face plastered on wanted posters, the only person left to help is Roz. However, the girl is much more concerned with chasing after the useless Harvey than saving the fabric of reality, nearly getting herself killed in the process. By pure cowardly luck, Ambrose flees Greendale shaking in his boots and ends up bumping into the Trinket Man, who conveniently hands over the exact tool needed to undo all the magical mess of the idol. Armed with her cousin's intellect and a bizarre stone soup made by Hilda, Sabrina charges at Blackwood and tosses his make-believe empire into the trash. Prudence decides she's had enough of the nonsense, hacks off her own father's head, and serves it on a silver platter, leaving the immortal villain condemned to spend eternity gossiping with himself as a macabre table ornament. To close out the circus, Nick pops up out of nowhere to announce that his fling with Prudence was a total front and that he and Sabrina are the true couple of destiny, leaving the poor protagonist breaking into a cold sweat and questioning if her vow of celibacy will survive the weekend. Pillars of hell sprout from the ground of Greendale as pieces of the town fall straight into the devil's lap. Everyone blames a potential spiritual world war, but in reality, it's just another eldritch terror called the Cosmic, which decided to play blender with heaven, earth, and hell. With reality collapsing, the two Sabrinas finally open their mouths and confess they cloned their own existence. Lucifer, Zelda, and even the passive Hilda give the girls a monumental scolding, while Ambrose is dragged into the middle of the humiliation, since the 134-year-old grown man was intimidated and forced to keep quiet by a teenager with raging hormones. The chaos is so great that Metatron, a high-ranking corporate angel, descends from heaven to impose order, and gives the two Sabrinas a 6-hour deadline to merge back into one body. Like any teenager about to cease to exist, Sabrina number 1 decides to spend her final hours devouring Nick in bed, while Sabrina, Queen of Hell, prefers public humiliation by singing Total Eclipse of the Heart with her friends. When time runs out, Ambrose rubs his two brain cells together and realizes the universal anomaly isn't the fault of the identity plagiarizers, but of the damn Cosmic. But Metatron is as stubborn as a mule and demands the sacrifice, so Lucifer, Zelda, Hilda, Ambrose, and the rest of the Witch fan club simply beat the celestial being until he becomes divine roadkill. To fix the hole in the universe, the brilliant idea is to toss one of the Sabrinas into a parallel universe. Since Lucifer and Zelda act like children fighting for custody of a pet, they decide the fate of the multiverse, using the most advanced method possible: rock, paper, scissors. Hell Sabrina wins the luck of losing the draw and is dispatched, throwing all her infernal reforms into the trash. Meanwhile, Lilith decides to kill Adam and gets a one-way ticket out of of hell as a bonus, with Lucifer draining her powers and leaving her semi-immortal to suffer like a commoner. Away from this divorce drama, the Fey Robin realizes he is withering away in the mortal realm, so Theo acts as the understanding hero and releases the boy to flee to the magical world with his moth friend. As for the losing Sabrina, she lands in her new home and comes face to face with the 90s versions of Zelda and Hilda, trapped in a bizarre sitcom set full of canned laughter that echoes through the void of their souls. Completely ignoring the fact that the universe was collapsing 5 minutes ago, the town's new headache is a bunch of corpses crawling out of the earth. But these aren't falling apart zombies. They come back perfectly intact, as if they were just taking a long nap. Dorcas sprouts up covered in blood to play with Agatha, Sabrina's deceased father returns to his office, and Dr. Cerberus's unbearable mother is already back criticizing Hilda for not being woman enough for her baby. Surprising a total of 0 people, Zelda is ecstatic, not for the people, but because her precious dog Vinegar Tom has returned from the dead. Meanwhile, Sabrina has an existential crisis because the father who died when she was a fetus rejects his own daughter, reminding her that she is the loneliest, neediest orphan on this astral plane. The culprit behind this haunt fest is the eldritch terror Lazarus himself. To fix the mess, Mambo Marie has to play an ancestral board game called Senet against the Supreme Corpse. If she wins, the dead go back underground. If she loses, all of humanity hits the grave. While the match plays out, the living have to babysit the unruly deceased. Dorcas suddenly remembers she was murdered and nearly ripped Agatha's head off, forcing everyone into group therapy to stop the guests from the beyond from starting a general massacre. Away from the fancy magic, the mortals are dealing with the worst teen movie premise possible. A demonic band called Satanic Panic kidnaps Harvey's dad because the old man was the snitch who caused their deaths in the past. Sabrina runs to whine and ask Lucifer for help, but gets another emotional slap in the face when the devil says this version of her isn't his daughter. Rejected by 2 fathers in the same day, a new record for the useless protagonist.
Now be gone from my sight.
The group's brilliant solution is to challenge the demonic kidnappers to a battle of the bands, turning the rescue into a terrible children's episode. Miraculously, they play their mediocre instruments well enough to win the bet, freeing Harvey's father and allowing Theo to finally grab Robin and convince the magical boy to stay in the mortal realm. The rap party begins with Dorcas forgiving Agatha, curing the killer's sanity before vanishing. But the one who steals the MVP award is Lilith, who uses the Spear of Longinus, originally bought to commit suicide, and stabs Lazarus to death, finishing off the terror. The grand finale happens when Mambo Marie decides to take off the mask, revealing to Zelda that she is actually Baron Samedi, a Haitian voodoo entity with a peculiar taste. Feeling like she was swallowed by a lie and played for a fool this whole time, Zelda feigns indifference, erases the romance from her memory, and lets the entity return to the world of the dead without shedding a single tear. Our dear Sabrina Morningstar is dropped into a corporate nightmare disguised as a sitcom, trapped in a ridiculous Truman Show-style world where her bedroom ceiling is literally a studio lighting rig. But since this girl's brain has already been fried by an excess of satanic rituals and teen drama, she simply accepts that there's no exit and goes for a stroll on the next set, like it's just another normal Tuesday in her pathetic life. To keep a shred of her sanity intact, the original Zelda and Hilda versions of this world are bizarrely sweet and helpful. Even the original Harvey proves to be quite useful and hands over valuable information, right after shoving his tongue down her throat out of nowhere for a French kiss, without any prior warning or consent. Meanwhile, the useless Theo and Roz are thrown in a corner somewhere replaying the worst moments of Season 2, and the glorious Salem we know has been replaced by a cheap plush toy that looks like it was bought on the deep web of Etsy. But instead of just being a nostalgic paperweight for fans of old sitcoms, this counterfeit cat turns out to be the key to all this madness. The plush kitty is actually the Endless, a colossal eldritch terror that secretly turned Ambrose into a private butcher, missing any actor who dares to go off script to become the production crew's bloody dinner. When Sabrina discovers the cast is swallowing meat behind the scenes to satisfy their hunger, Salem looks like the big villain, but in the end, he becomes the most unlikely ally in this mess. All this happens because the Void, another world-devouring eldritch terror, was conveniently written into the show's script. Salem, with his limited plush intelligence, thought that since they are opposite forces, the Void and the Endless would simply cancel each other out and be fine. They even hire Caliban as a luxury construction worker to build the sets for the Void's arrival. While the original aunts try to calm everyone down by saying the impending apocalypse is just another special season finale event to boost ratings. But the reality check hits hard, and the Void proves it couldn't care less about the cat's rigid script. The cosmic anomaly begins to swallow everything in its path, and the aunts themselves, along with Nick and the rest of the background cast, reveal themselves as loyal servants of the Void, starting to chew and devour everyone on set in a disgusting banquet. With no time to cancel the series with the board of directors, Sabrina and Salem run for their lives, fleeing this doomed parallel world while the screenwriter cat creates miraculous holes and drops sets on the enemy's faces to ensure they escape before becoming food for outsourced zombies. The frantic escape from the Void ends with the fake cat possibly dead, and our Sabrina Morningstar kicking the bucket for good, with the sacrifice of her divine copy weighing on her shoulders. The original Sabrina's 17th birthday turns into a literal weight. Taking advantage of the desperate mood, the Trinket Man appears and hands her Pandora's box, hoping the little witch can swallow the Void from the inside out. But since the Spellman family has the wonderful gift of ruining absolutely everything, Nick, Ambrose, and the aunts pull her back prematurely, like someone yanking out a USB drive without ejecting safely. And to make the cosmic screw-up even worse, they shove Sabrina's soul into Morningstar's fresh corpse. Lilith, who can't keep her tongue in her mouth, runs to gossip to Lucifer, causing him and Caliban to declare immediate war to recover the body of his dead daughter. The problem is, they all discover the hard way the magnitude of the colossal mistake the Spellmans made. The Void proved to be the ultimate nightmare and began to overflow from within Sabrina. Now every time she gets stressed, any useless person around her is magically deleted from existence. Caliban and even Harvey's dad are swallowed by the walking black hole, leaving the ex-boyfriend whimpering in rage just like you when the internet cuts out mid-match. Meanwhile, Lucifer makes the worst decision of his immortal life by ignoring the deal to return Lilith's powers, preferring to focus on the Void crisis. Fed up with the stalling, Lilith takes the same weapon that killed Lazarus, slices the devil from top to bottom, and drinks all his blood with gusto, swallowing the Dark Lord's warm juice to finally sit on that infernal throne. Completely spiraling with guilt, Sabrina flees to the mountains of madness. There, the disgusting Faustus finds her and spends 6 weeks pretending to be a benevolent mentor, when in reality, he just wanted to steal the Void's crushing power for himself. But before the plan works, Prudence, Agatha, Roz, and Ambrose invade the spiritual retreat too early. The stress of the surprise visit causes Sabrina to accidentally swallow Prudence and Roz into the depths of the Void, forcing Ambrose to run back and gather the whole gang for one last mission. Nick resolves the first part by rescuing Pandora's box, and the group smashes Faustus's face with humiliating ease. Then comes the inevitable climax, where Sabrina needs to be squeezed to the limit to bleed out the Void and save the universe. And contrary to all protagonist expectations, even while inhabiting the armored body of a god, she simply dies. Her life flashes before her eyes. Nick locks all the terrors in the magic box, the world is saved, but the little witch becomes permanent room temperature. After several dramatic funerals, we find Sabrina in the hereafter, sitting in a white waiting room. And guess who shows up out of nowhere? Nick himself, who decided to drown on purpose just to be with her on the other side, proving that their romance always had the same toxic energy as a Chernobyl Romeo and Juliet.